Can this high net worth couple retire? Let's take a look and find out. I'm Elizabeth Prindle, and I help households live beyond the budget, but within their means. All right. Let's go ahead and share here. I have to admit, it's been a bit of a trick to see how to develop free financial education and enablement content that's not investment advice and shouldn't be taken as investment advice. No advice is being given, just interesting client case studies and how to anonymize the data. So we'll give it a try here. Now, before this first meeting with the financial planning client, I send a series of online forms where the client can go and input their data. So, a lot of demographic and biographic data, birthdays, names, dependents, meaning children or other relatives that require their income and support, their, investment accounts, their other assets if they own a primary residence, and so on and so forth. Depending on the compliance of the client before that first meeting, meaning if they do all the work, we get a lot done in the first meeting. And I can already start on the second meeting in the first meeting. So there is a hefty reward to the client to do the online experience. Additionally, our meetings are like this on Zoom with screen share. So that's an important aspect here to take into consideration. The first meeting we call data polishing or data gathering, and it's really to fill in the gaps of anything that might be missing in order to get them a result. And it's pretty binary. Can you retire or can you not? If you can retire, what are some of the scoping goals you have that we can start to play around with? And if you cannot retire, how do we refunction our relationship as a financial planner to help you with cash flow? We can still get to a plan result. We can still show you how you can retire. Me as a planner, if I'm charging someone in debt or having cash flow issues where they can't afford their lifestyles in order to retire according to their goals, I want to make our time worth it to get them there. And you can see my other videos on budgeting and cash flow to get a sense of what that looks like. It's a little bit more in depth in a case where a client may or may not be able to retire according to their plans. So what do? We jump in, and the client sees a somewhat different view when they go through here. So we see we have married couple. One spouse is working, the other's retired, and they're married in the state of California. I actually need to build this out further for them. They don't have dependent age children, but they do have adult children, and they may or may not have a trust. And this matters in terms of survivorship. We want to look at either spouse passing and making sure that all their wishes for their accounts are properly represented, given that we're in the state of California, it's community property state, so that impacts the way you can pass assets. They also have some additional properties, so I want to make sure we're looking at a trust for them in that case. We listed out some expectations and concerns, and I'm going to skip through that. It's so heavily personal. I don't like to dwell too much on that from a generalized context, but really it's me as a planner saying, hey, I've heard you since our proposal meeting. I know what we're driving towards. What am I making sure I need to include? So that could be extreme longevity, health concerns, etc. The next is we work with a series of defaults. So a retirement age default as well. And typically the retirement age is 65. So these might have had some adjustments. Some clients can adjust them. If they don't, we try to retire people at 65 and then we have them live. These are planning ages. So the plan will, end for them essentially when they have a less than 30% chance of living beyond that age. Now, these are actuarial tables. It's a fancy way of statistics and numbers to say that figure. Although we all have anecdotes that say, I have my Aunt Mildred, she smoked a pack a day and drank a whole bunch for every celebration and lived till 106 when her diet consisted of 2 hot dogs a day, right? We have anecdotes about that. So as a planner, I do like to look at extreme longevity. I do like to understand family health history, if there's diagnoses of things like Alzheimer's, dementia, et cetera, to get a sense of, how and if we can plan beyond these elements. And it's more so than just saving more for longevity. And we can get into that later. Retiring in California, Connecticut, and New York State are going to be some of the least favorable tax states to retire in. There could be one or two others, those just top of mind. And I also practice primarily with California and some New York clients, as well as a Connecticut client. So if you can do it here, it's likely that you'll be able to do it in other US states outside of those three. So that's okay to start with there. So now we're looking at goals. I think these are a bit shy. I'd like to see it built out a little bit more. So we do have now goals. This is interesting. When you're a high net worth client, or when the first time I did a retirement projection, I think I was 21 years old and making 30,000 a year, maybe less than 30,000 a year. So in that context, how do I know how much I'm going to need to retire? I obviously want to buy a house, have kids, whatever. So there's a way to start just initially, which says, how much do you need to live off of today in today's dollars? So at that time, maybe I was living off of $25,000 a year. That's how it feels. So I'm going to put that number in. I've already paid taxes on it. It's just the amount I need to live off of, right? Which your net pay is a good gauge of this figure. It can get complicated with multiple spouse, different, with two spouse households and things like that. But very simply, but these folks are closer to retirement. The amount they spend is likely going to be similar to the amount they will spend. This number will inflate. So the number goes higher each year by a specific percentage. So next year, the software is going to be planning for their retirement, costing them 165 for year two, right? 165,000. And on and on. It'll continue to increase. It doesn't mean it feels like more money. It feels exactly as money feels today. So, how that can be thought of is your lifestyle doesn't have to change too much at that point. Healthcare inflates faster than other basic living expenses inflate theoretically. So we apply a much higher percentage increase to healthcare. Healthcare includes the health insurance premiums you pay before Medicare, which starts at age 65, and Medicare premium estimates that you'll pay starting at age 65 and beyond. So if you retire early, you're going to have a higher budget goal item for health premiums. Now, there's a whole lot of topics related to that. So if you have questions about retiring early and health insurance and health premiums, if you have questions about Medicare, definitely leave them in the comments and we can help get them addressed. And then travel. Travel's going to inflate as much as any other basic living expense would inflate. We also deal with different scenarios of spouses when one's retired only, or two retired only, or one's working, the other passes, one passes, the other's working. It's all the iterations that we can come up with to assess an income gap for what may be required. This is just extra. We call it travel, and that it's recurring from when they retire ongoing. And it's going to inflate as much as basic living expenses. I can also edit this to inflate higher. I can do every other year. Sometimes people look at home maintenance this way, where once every 10 years, there's going to be $100,000 on home maintenance, depending on if you've never, worked on your home. There's lots of different ways to see this. I see this as great. Let's call it travel for now. Likely some of this budget is travel as well, but this is just an extra amount. And in fact, I may even want to put in something further. And that's because I already know this plan, spoiler alert, which I won't spoil you. We'll get there. So I'm going to start it immediately, put it in as $1. It's going to recur every year, and it's going to go through till the end of the plan. You know, I'm going to put this in so I can be a little bit more flexible with it, because retirement spending is often U-shaped, where we spend more in the early years of retirement because we can and we're able to, and there's a lot of deferments we've made to get there. Then there's kind of a lull once those bucket list items start being checked off the box, if you're so lucky and privileged. And then spend can go up in the end. Partially just think about mobility and extra services, housekeeping, and things like that. But health costs can go up too. It's not only due to health costs and expenses, but that's just the reality of what they've seen on average for retirement spend. So in this case, I'm going to have just a discretionary spend bucket. I'm going to inflate it as it is. And this is because I know they have some assets to work with. Great. Don't know how this moved here. See if we can move it up. Anyways, I'll revisit that later. So what's going to make up your first kind of income in retirement? For a lot of Americans who've been employed for at least 10 years full time, or been married to someone who's worked, 10 years full time and been married to them a certain period of time, Social Security. So you can go to ssa.gov at any time. They used to send out statements in the mail. I don't know if they'll continue to do that, but they certainly email me reminders now that I have an account. I would go ahead and check eligibility for benefits, basically create a login so you can take a look and see what your projected benefit will be. Extra credit, it has a list of your wage history. If you see anything that's off or wonky, you could either have a tax situation problem or there could be an error. It's really hard to look into. I'm not going to say it's easy, but worth looking to see where you are in the Social Security cycle. Have you worked enough quarters, which is 40 quarters full time over 10 years, to earn your benefit amount and what your projected benefit will be? And there's different ages to claim Social Security and different implications. That's a big topic I'm not going to go through right now. Suffice to say, just to get someone to a result, can we use your assets to fund your goals that we just outlined by those amounts in today's dollars after tax for those date ranges? And I do put placeholders in case I need to do stuff to explore, and oh, by the way, starting at these ages, I always use full retirement age. That is a Social Security specific term. Your full retirement age may be different. In this case, it's listed out here. And we can see, or at least be knowing that there's a certain amount of Social Security income coming in. And Social Security is for life. So that's wonderful. There's also, if you're married and your spouse passes, you will get the higher of the two benefit amounts. If they have not claimed at that time of their passing, you'll still get whichever is the higher of the two, whether your spouse earned it or you earned it. So the lower of the two Social Security payments drops off. So it's good to think about Social Security, not just from when I need the money, but also if you're married in the context of your household. There's even more to Social Security than just that. So I'm not going to belabor any of that. If you have questions, particularly special needs children, disability, dependents with disabilities, ex-spouses, there's a lot we could go through with Social Security. I'm just trying to get to the initial result. So oftentimes clients will come to the meeting prepared with this or can access it. Otherwise, we create an estimate based on the salary that we entered at their original profile information. To keep the data anonymized, we have some various pensions that they're eligible for, as well as rental income. And there's a way to look at rental income strategically. If you're interested more in rental income projections for retirees, I'm happy to do more specific planning topics on that. But this is what the figure is. I've already verified that for this software, it translates to what they need. Their investment assets, so these are all retirement or regular accounts that they've been putting money into and is invested. They're also adding additional amounts each year. And that would be typical if you're self-employed like this couple, or if you have an employer, you're participating in a 401k plan. It could be one spouse, two spouses. You can put in 2024 up to 23,000 into your 401k plan or 403b plan, sometimes also a 457 plan. If you're age 50 and above, you can put another 7,500 away into it. There's also conditions and plans that allow for a further amount into your plan beyond an employer match. I won't go into that, but if you have questions about bigger retirement account contributions, I can talk about that as well in a future video. I don't like to put whether they're willing to put extra savings or not. I like to use the software to determine what a good amount might be. So I tend to skip this. There is some sort of 10% likelihood they'd be able to blah, blah, blah in the software. I skip it. Then we have other assets. This is other property. I'm intentionally not selling their property in this case. We can and will because they've expressed some interest in one of the properties being sold, but it's attached to one of their rental income line items. So we kind of have to further break it out. And I use this tab up here. I'm not going to highlight it here, but it's a spreadsheet. So I can get a sense and we can start filling in the gaps there. It's not impossible to do without more information, but in order to understand how an actual property contributes to your investment assets to be investing, growing, but also taking money out of to live off of, there's a lot more detail that needs to go into it. And there's a great worksheet that I use. We haven't yet reviewed insurances, but we will. Insurances, in my mind, are a little more flexible in my planning practice because open enrollment is attached to your medical and health coverages. And then whether through your employer or through an exchange, like in California, Covered California. Additionally, when your insurance renewal is up is a better time in terms of a trigger event. You get the renewal notice, then you look for quotes and so on and so forth. There is an argument you can be looking for quotes and switch insurances. Even if you've prepaid for a year or 6 months, you'll get refunded the amount you don't use and switch to a better insurance. But insurance is both, are you adequately covered and not a dollar more than you need and at the right premium cost? And those are kind of some tug and pull for certain high net worth clients. For lower net worth clients, it's a little more straightforward. You just need less, and that can work. Insurance is worth, you have so much more conversation. I believe in self-insuring first for the high frequency, low devastation events, low catastrophic events. So a broken window in your car, so on and so forth. But for the very low frequency, high catastrophic events, total home destruction due to wildfire or passing of a spouse prematurely, maybe some disability situations, then those are worth insuring for. And there's just a whole lot of goes into that. For now, we'll get to it with this client. They don't have employer stock as far as I'm aware, but they have had that historically. Liabilities include their mortgages, and that's going to be one of those other asset data points I'm going to want to further break out so we can understand if we sold a property with a mortgage and there's a sales expense, meaning a realtor percentage we have to pay, and there's capital gains tax. And when that property sells, whenever we functionally sell it in the math, that revenue or income or other retirement income as rental property income line item ends. So we have to make sure that those are playing nicely in the software together and we're not overestimating. We don't want to say they're going to be receiving a certain rental line item for the rest of their lives if they sell that property that is responsible for it. So we have to be very careful with the relationships of the data. This is so much easier than working in spreadsheets and on paper and calculators. So I will say this is a huge leg up. But at the end of the day, this software, like many other planning softwares out there, is just a spreadsheet and formulas in the background. It's extensive and powerful, don't get me wrong, but it isn't as though it's, anything more than just here's a formula for this data, push it out. And then we get a net worth statement. Now, I have to say, I know this couple personally. They're very sensible, kind, humble human beings. See them walking their dog every day. They have 2 kids that they wanted the best for and seem to be living great lives. I mean, in all senses of the word, they're a success, and still retirement or stepping away from formal paid employment, even though one of the spouses is self-employed, can be a challenge. So I want to emphasize that here, that building wealth, it seems like the first 100K, the first million, is the hardest. But it does seem to be the habits that get you there are the habits that will continue to get you there. But once you have accumulated your wealth, a lot more goes into it. Insurance can become particularly important to understand their other rental properties that they own, because we don't want a tenant to file a suit against them. And what could they file a suit against? Their entire non-retirement net worth. It could be even some of their retirement net worth related to an IRA account. There's typically been $1 million limit, but creditors and people who want to sue you, that's what you're protecting against. So when you look at liability limits on auto insurance, 500,000, 250,000 or 500,000, those are the amounts that you are protected outside of retirement accounts for. So if you have a much larger net worth, you really have to think through, how much more coverage do I get? What is that called? Where do I get it? And that's a lot of what a planner is doing. A lot of people know how to build wealth and get there, but then how to make sure you're adequately protected. A trust plays into this as well, or estate planning. Everyone says, "Oh, I don't I don't have a trust. I don't need an estate plan." But the reality is everybody has an estate plan in the United States. Each of the 50 states has its own probate law and estate laws. So your estate will pass. The state has a way to make sure your assets will pass. So you do have an estate plan. It's just how involved do you want to get, both time, money, and resource wise, to explicitly state where you want things to go? That's a huge conversation as well. So the math of all this is, can they achieve those goals that we've outlined based on this lineup of, some retirement income coming from rentals, some from pensions, some from Social Security. Oh, and by the way, all this money that they've saved. Now, I already know, and reaching all these goals. The reason why I have a variable spend is because when I take a look at their assets, even looking here, if we use a 4% withdrawal, so the safe withdrawal rate is typically known as 4%, and it actually is a plus or minus. So it can be above 4% or below 4%. So I like to use 3%. It handles all of that. It's overly conservative, but gives me a good rule of thumb. This would not be the way I manage money for people or retirement distributions. But when I look at data, just to see, can we retire, can we not, right? I need a binary answer to focus the next stage of my work. So I take 3% and multiply it against, I'm going to call it 4 million just because 3%'s, that's 120 a year. Plus they have 83,000 coming in from rental incomes and whatnot. Plus another 60,000. Again, these are just rough shot estimates. So their annual income, once they're receiving Social Security, without any special fandangled moves, without selling any property, is 263,000 that I come up with conservatively. Now, maybe we have taxes, right? So, okay. I mean, maybe we have taxes. Maybe something happens, there's vacancies. Still, it's not unheard of to take that figure and estimate that it's 200,000. Now they need 160 plus another maybe 20 for healthcare. I'm overshooting that. That's 180. And then 20 for travel. That's 200,000. Great. But what to do with all of this, right? Let's say, because of their primary residence, let's just take a certain amount of their other assets, their investment properties, and let's subtract mortgages. I already know what it is. I'm just putting that in. It might be larger for other people. And we know there's going to be capital gains tax, both federally and in the state they live in, as well as sales expense. So let's just be super conservative. And let's multiply that out. So if they liquidated their non-primary residence, that's an additional, and then invested the difference, it's another 67,000 a year at the 3% withdrawal rule plus the 200. I know I'm moving quick through this, but essentially I'm working out that they have some real decisions to make. They're going to leave, and at the rate they spend and the rate their assets are growing, they're going to be leaving a huge estate if they don't make some very important choices about their lives and retirement. Also, if their children, as they've indicated, adult children are fine financially, they're well set up, they paid all the things, the wedding, the college, the initial first properties, they've kind of checked the box of like done that work. I don't want them to needlessly be constraining their lives now if they don't have to. They have a pet that they care very dearly for. This would be an opportunity if a health event came up with their pet. I could confidently say to them, it's okay to spend if that's worth it to you and the perceived pain level that your pet may be experiencing. You know, if they had other plans in mind than selling the, other assets, what could be done there? Also, maybe we take a look at, there's something called long-term care insurance, and most people either can't afford long-term care insurance or um, it's not a good insurance deal. It's an insurance, basically, and it protects you to cover some costs if you become in need of long-term care because you either have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or dementia. Typically has to be severe. So people self-insure. Self-insure means I'm using my cash first before I involve insurance. Now, in this case, maybe we dedicate one of the properties for that purpose, right? We could sell that property and then generate cash, then invest the cash, use that money or part of that money to pay for the additional costs that in-home care or a skilled nursing facility may be required for that spouse. So we can start putting some numbers together on what the worst case might be. Now, there's long-term care opportunities to self-insure and choices all over the net worth map from zero on up. So it is important to also understand that just because you don't have a high net worth doesn't mean there are options, solutions, and things involved. So can they retire? Yes. They're probably undershooting what they might want to spend in retirement. Rest assured, though, a lot of people who tell me what amount they spend each year may get it wrong, right? They may get it wrong. Usually people underreport how much they spend in a year. That's fine for our purposes. So then my work is to understand, well, how would we budget you, right? Who cares if it's 160 a year? Let's say it's 240 a year because that's kind of what we're coming up with. So what if we start you on a 20K allowance each month? How would we set that up? How does your household manage money now? What's your checking account and credit card situation like? Those are the questions that I'd start asking is how can we start to fold in what this feels like? Okay, if it's 20,000 a month, let's go ahead and take out certain amounts of income that are coming in. And, interesting enough, the people who can benefit from these strategies are usually the people who have the assets, but your Social Security can go up 8% a year from 67 to 68. It can go up another 8% from 68 to 69 and another 8% from 69 and 70. Oh, and if you wait even a couple months, however many months, so if you wait 67, your birthday turns 67, you wait 3 more months, 3 months divided by 12 months, roughly 1/4, times 8%, which would be 2%, is the increase on your benefit for life. It goes up, but you will receive that higher benefit all the way for the rest of your life. So even waiting a couple months can be great, but you have to make sure you have the funds to get you there. Now, a lot of people tell me, oh, I can make 8% in another investment or more elsewhere. I think that's fine. You can start it as soon as 62, but it does also go down each year before your full retirement age. So it's the reverse phenomenon. But rarely have I seen an 8% safe return. Now, is Social Security safe or not? Warrants bigger discussion. We could take a look at that. Um, maybe, maybe not. But to get an 8% return safely, more safer, we'll say, is pretty rare, right? If we can only get 4% in a savings account right now, and that's subject to full income taxes, Social Security is not subject to full income taxes. And there's that interesting nuance of survivorship in the case of married households. There's a lot at play here, and that's what a planner, I do this work, I see all these analyses over and over again, so I can give generalized advice and then dig deeper into the details. And then as these ages approach, there's further conversation to see what can and may happen. A lot of people start Social Security early for 2 reasons. One, they just don't have the money to wait, retired early, disability, lots of things. And the other reason is, they want to take the money and run. We don't know if it's going to be there. We don't know if it's going to be there if you take the lower benefit or the higher benefit. So at least if things are based on percentages, you wait for the higher benefit, you have it longer. There's also break even ages. Are you going to live past 80? Then it makes sense to wait. But because it's a lifetime annuity compared to any estimates we use for investment assets, right? We call it safe withdrawal rule is basically boundaried by a 30-year time frame. So when we talk about a lifetime annuity stream, like something like a Social Security, that could be 40 years. We don't know. And so that's really kind of the balance, the tug and pull that we're looking at overall. And we have the math that can tell us, one way or the other. So big, hairy, scary, complex plan, big, happy outcome at the first meeting to say you can pull out the champagne or sparkling apple cider flutes and go ahead and pour some and cheers yourself. You are ready to retire, even if you want to continue working just because you want to. Now the techniques come into play with, oh, are we putting money into retirement accounts sensibly from a tax perspective? Because you could be saving money on taxes now, or you have some Roth options being self-employed, even if you're taking from your savings now to live off of. And what might be the strategy there? Moving funds from pre-tax accounts to post-tax or Roth accounts is another element of their plan. Looking at, reasonably speaking, do they want to be managing property 10, 20 years from now, right? Most people think they're going to be managing their properties and being landlords for life because it's like, what a big thing. I mean, as a millennial, I couldn't even imagine that. I don't have rental property. It'd be amazing to have rental property. And yeah, I want that income stream for life, baby. But the reality is, you may get to an age where you don't want to. And if you don't need the money, you can make a different choice. And if you need the money, can you take a percentage to reliably have a property manager in place so that at least you don't have to do the work? You can always choose to do the work, but you don't have to do the work. So this is what a data polishing meeting looks like. In the next meeting with this client, I'll have given them, after this meeting, their homework, summarizing everything that we've covered in all the different pockets, right? Their cash flow notes, their goals notes, their social security notes, on and on and on. And distinguishing between what is our meeting summary compared to pulling out the items that are specific action items. I want more information about their other assets. They have another few requests from me, so I'll put those in. And I really kind of project manage our planning experience. And we'll set our next meeting on the calendar. I do everything digitally. And yeah, I mean, these types of meetings are great. It doesn't always, they they were not individuals who had sincerely high consistent income as a household, and they were able to build a tremendous situation for themselves. So I see this all the time. I see teachers who have amazing retirement projections. I see tech employees who sold their company who need to continue to work for another 10, 20 years because their lifestyles cost so much. So the interesting nuances and dichotomies of this space and working with clients is so fascinating. So hopefully you can benefit from my client work, and so can my clients. Again, if I missed any other topics that you want to make sure that I double down and can target, leave a message in the comments, subscribe and like so you can continue to receive my content as well. And yeah, looking forward to seeing more of you. Thanks.